When I think back to that journey, the one that began on a quiet morning when the mist still hugged the earth, I can still feel the weight of silence that followed me for miles. I was a young monk then, full of conviction, full of pride in my discipline. The monastery had taught me rules, strict, unyielding, carved deep into my mind like scriptures on stone. Avoid attachments. Avoid temptation. Do not touch a woman. These lessons had become my armor, and I wore them as though they made me pure. That morning, my companion was an older monk, wise and calm, the kind of man whose silence spoke louder than words. We had walked for hours through winding forest paths, our feet brushing against fallen leaves, still damp from the night's rain. The river ahead was not part of our plan, but life rarely cares for plans. It was swollen from the recent storm, its waters dark and restless, churning with hidden currents. There, standing by the riverbank, was a woman. Her clothes were elegant but soaked, clinging to her like a second skin. Her face was pale with fear as she looked at the wild water before her. When she saw us, she called out for help. I remember freezing for a moment, the rules echoing in my head like a warning bell. Do not touch a woman. I looked to my elder brother, expecting him to walk past as I planned to do, but he didn't. Without hesitation, he walked toward her. "Let me help you," he said softly, and before I could even breathe a word of protest, he lifted her into his arms. I watched, half shocked, half disbelieving, as he carried her across the raging river. The water splashed around his robes, the current tugged at his legs, but his face remained calm, like the surface of a still pond. When they reached the other side, he gently set her down. She bowed deeply, tears in her eyes, and thanked him over and over before disappearing into the trees. I said nothing as we continued our walk, but inside, my thoughts were a storm louder than the river we had just crossed. He had failed to uphold the discipline we swore to follow. I convinced myself that my silence was righteousness, that I was better for holding my judgment quietly. But the truth is, I was angry. Angry because I didn't understand. Angry because his peace made me question my own. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, and the forest thinned into open fields. Still, the scene played over in my mind again and again, until I couldn't keep it in any longer. Finally, I turned to him and said, "Brother, as monks, we are not supposed to touch women. Why did you do that?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, edged with the frustration I had been holding all day. He stopped walking. The wind stirred the leaves at our feet. Then he turned to me with a faint smile that was neither amused nor reproachful. "Brother," he said quietly, "I left that woman by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" His words struck me harder than any reprimand ever could. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but deep down, I knew what he meant. I had carried her not in my arms, but in my mind. I had held on to judgment, resentment, and self-righteousness long after the moment had passed. The real weight wasn't hers, it was mine. That night, when we reached the next village, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the wind brushing against the thatched roof, replaying every moment in my head. The older monk's calm face kept returning to me. I began to see how heavy my thoughts had become, how often I clung to things that no longer existed. A harsh word someone once said, a mistake I made years ago, a regret that gnawed at me quietly whenever I was alone. I realized that I had been carrying an invisible burden all my life, one that had nothing to do with rivers or vows. In the days that followed, we continued our journey together. But I walked differently now, not because the road had changed, but because my heart had. Whenever something troubled me, I would picture that river and remind myself to set it down, to let the current take it away. Slowly, I began to understand that discipline isn't about clinging tightly to rules it's about learning to let go of what weighs you down. Years later, long after the old monk had passed away, I found myself walking alone again, this time as the elder. One afternoon, I came across a young traveler sitting by a stream, his face tight with anger and grief. I sat beside him and listened as he poured out his troubles, how someone had betrayed him, how he couldn't move past it. His voice trembled with pain, but underneath it, I heard the same echo I once carried, the sound of holding on. When he finished, I smiled softly and told him the story of the two monks and the woman by the river. He listened quietly, and when I reached the end, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I didn't tell him what to do. I just left him with those words. She was set down long ago. Why are you still carrying her? That night, as I watched the stars ripple on the surface of the water, I thought about how life is filled with moments like that, river crossing situations that test our hearts more than our rules. Sometimes we think being good means never bending, never touching what's forbidden. But true wisdom isn't about fear of impurity. It's about compassion that transcends it. I've learned that the heaviest burdens are not the ones we carry in our hands, but the ones we refuse to release from our minds. Resentment, regret, judgment. All of them cling to us like wet robes after crossing a river. We, stubborn as we are, walk miles without realizing we could simply stop, breathe, and set them down. If I could tell you one thing from the depths of my own experience, it would be this. The world will always give you reasons to hold on to pain. People will hurt you, situations will challenge you, memories will haunt you. But peace doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from releasing it. Let go of what you cannot change, forgive where you can. And when the river of life rises before you, don't be afraid to cross it. Because sometimes carrying someone for a moment is the most human thing you can do. And sometimes learning to let go is the most divine.